everyone. I'm your host, Brittany Jones-Cooper, and welcome back to Build. The film Nona tells the story of a girl from Honduras who meets a charming boy who promises to get her to America so she can be reunited with her mother. Instead, Nona faces a perilous journey when he doesn't deliver on that promise. Today, I'm sitting down with producer Kate Bosworth to talk about the film's message, but first, here's the trailer from Nona.
Aleluya, gloria a su nombre. Si estás cansado y trabajado de sufrir en este mundo, que solo te trae tristeza, dolor, amargura, ven a Cristo. Él te está llamando. Dice su palabra, venid a mí todos los que estáis trabajados y cargados, y yo os haré descansar. El descanso que Él te ofrece es eterno. El descanso que Él te ofrece es permanente. Aleluya. Es por toda la eternidad. El mundo, el diablo te ofrece placeres. Tal vez dirás que vas a encontrar la paz en el alcohol.
Let's start with something simple. What's your name?
Everyone put your hands together for Kate Bosworth.
Thank you, guys.
How you doing today? Welcome back to Build.
Thank you so much. I always love being here.
And I love having you here, especially to talk about a film like this. We obviously saw you in the trailer, but this film you're very involved in. You're a producer on it. So tell me why this was something that you wanted to be in front of and behind the camera on.
Yeah, so my husband is Michael Polish, and he wrote, directed, and actually also shot this movie. So he was wearing quite a few hats on this. And you know, he was driving home one day from work, and he heard on the radio a story about a sex house that had been busted not so far from our home in Los Angeles, and that there were 44 known sex houses in the Los Angeles area. And he came home and he said, you know, I feel like there's a very important narrative story to be told here. You know, I mean, he and I knew what sex trafficking was, we knew what human trafficking was, but we didn't really know the sort of how it happened or the why it happened or what to do about it. And though, you know, there's an irony to it, because though human trafficking is literally about, you know, using and holding human beings against their will and abusing them, somehow we felt like the humanity is kind of lost when you talk about it. It feels very statistical and sort of overwhelming that way. And that, you know, you talk about like the millions of people sold into human trafficking and, you know, the billions of dollars that is made from, you know, abusing these people, but it becomes faceless somehow, you know? And so we thought if we could really connect the humanity and the empathy with putting a face, though narratively, to human trafficking, then perhaps we can make a difference somehow in telling the story.
Like you said, a lot of people know it's happening, but kind of want to pretend that it's not. So what was the journey like getting this movie made?
Yeah, I mean, that's partly why it's there's so sort of little known about, I think, human trafficking and sex trafficking, or why it's difficult to know about it, is that it's so hidden. You know, I mean, it's purposefully behind closed doors. I mean, that's, you know, that it's the human traffickers are, you know, are clever that way, where they don't want it out in front. It is, you know, something that they want to keep out of the public, and you know, all the more reason for us to want to tell this story. And you know, producing it was it was a very sort of intense experience, to say the least. I mean, my husband is his mother's side is from Mexico, so his mom crossed the border when she was 4, and Michael was obviously born in the United States, and he really felt like there was a kind of a personal stroke for him with the movie. In the trailer, you know, you didn't see any dialogue; it's all in Spanish. Though it's subtitled, but it was very important to him to sort of create the most authentic way of telling the story as possible. Nona is from Honduras. She has nothing. You know, San Pedro Sula is one of the most dangerous cities in the world, which is where Michael shot. It's known as the murder capital of the world. And so we open the movie with her there, and you see the poverty and you see the danger. And then, you know, she moves to, she meets a boy who says, come and have a better life in America. And so he convinces her to join him, and it kind of becomes this like almost coming of age road trip type movie through Guatemala and all through Mexico. And Michael and about a crew of 8 to 10 traveled this road that a lot of these girls and boys take, and finally crossed the border into Tijuana. So he wanted to write it in Spanish. He wanted to shoot in the most dangerous parts of the world, and he wanted to cast an unknown. And so I thought, well, that'll be easy to get the financing. You know, checking all the boxes. And so we ultimately decided to pay for the movie ourselves, because we thought, you know, to tell the story the way that we want to tell it, the way that Michael wants to tell it as a filmmaker, and to really tell it in the most authentic and the purest way was to just not have to answer to anyone else, honestly, except for ourselves, and make the movie that we wanted to make. So that was one side of it, producerially, was actually paying for it, making that decision. And then the other side of it was Michael shooting, you know, in dangerous places. I was deemed too high risk to go to those places. So I stayed in Los Angeles and was, you know, booking cars, booking flights, booking hotel rooms. There was a lot of corruption in terms of, you know, I would have booked a hotel room, and Michael would be checking in, and he'd say, "There's no hotel room booked." I'm like, I booked it. I see it out of my bank account. It's booked. Nope, they say it's not booked. It's booked. So then I'd pay for it twice, and I'd call my credit card company and I'd say, "I know this is really weird, but you have to go along with this fraud, but I'm going to call you in about 3 weeks, and I'm going to redline all the fraud that's been going on." And, you know, it was just this kind of crazy experience of having to somehow work, you know, in very difficult places in the world to work, and also very dangerous parts of the world to work. And so the third aspect of it, producing-wise, was making sure that the security was there around them. So we sent an ex-Navy SEAL with them, so he had like all the intel and was coordinating like the armed guards and the armed cars and everything that they needed to be safe. So there was like really a lot of moving pieces on this one. So like when I sort of laughed in the beginning when I said it was intense, I mean, it was just like one thing after another. But you know, because of the subject matter, and because, you know, there was danger for the team because they were in very dangerous parts of the world. However, nothing, you know, it paled in comparison to what, you know, these people are going through. So I think there was almost this like superhuman like feeling that we all had, whether it was Sulem and Jessie, who Sulem plays Nona, and she's incredible. She's from El Salvador. Her first feature, she's just absolutely a revelation. Jessie McKinney as well is absolutely incredible. And the rest of, you know, Michael and the rest of the crew. It was just, everyone just, it was not a movie, it was a mission at the end of the day. And I think everyone really kind of felt that way and took it on.
Hearing that ties me even more to the story, because obviously your husband and the crew, they're down there in danger, and then you understand why somebody would want to flee a place like that and kind of risk everything for another chance or another life.
Right. I mean, you know, it's not lost on me that this is, the release of this movie is kind of colliding with a very sort of like topical and like charged moment at the border. Like literally the journey that Michael and the crew and the cast took is pretty much the same exact track that the caravan took. That's, you know, everyone there at the border at the moment. And, you know, my heart breaks because I crossed that border. I crossed it on foot from the San Diego area over the bridge to Tijuana, where everyone is. And I see them on the news, and I think about, you know, where they've come from and what they're fleeing from, and like the why they're wanting to escape that. And then I also think about the vulnerability that they all have, and human traffickers, sex traffickers prey on the most vulnerable in society. And so I look at the news and I look at these people, and I just, you know, I think about that often, you know.
And you mentioned there's a lot of statistics around sex and human trafficking. One that's at the end of the film is that it's a $32 billion industry. What other research did you have to do to make sure that you could tell these stories with honesty?
You know, we learned, you know, it's interesting. It's almost difficult to find like legitimate, accurate statistics, honestly, because You can speak with valid organizations, and they'll tell you the same thing. They'll say, this is the number we have, but honestly, it's probably times 4. You know what I mean? Like but they can't sort of put the stamp on it, but they know that it's probably far more escalated than what they've even reported. But we learned early on that we needed to partner with an organization that has been working in this field for a long time, that has a lot of information, has a lot of validity in this area. And so we partnered with CAST, the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, Los Angeles, and I've just leaned on Kate Buck as the CEO, and I've leaned on her so much, and like literally gone to Washington D.C. and like lobbied with her, and it's just. It started with such a sort of seedling kernel of an idea of like, we need to do something, and it sort of like escalated into something so much bigger than anything I could have possibly imagined. And really, it's about the collective of people trying to fight the fight in the same way and sort of banding together in that sense. So I've really leaned a lot on CAST and for their information, for their knowledge, but also now, as an activist, I've really involved myself with them. And I encourage anyone who wants to learn more about the issue or wants to know more about how they can be a part of the solution to go to CAST LA's website, because they're absolutely incredible. And their organization works with a lot of survivors. And so their knowledge and their intel is based on people who are actually human trafficked and sex trafficked. So they know what's going on the inside, and they empower the survivors to, find footing again and work within the organization.
And I think they help to also probably shed a light on that it's not just one story. Women come to this life in a lot of different ways, which the film touches on when you meet some of the other women that she's living with.
Right.
And whether it's the foster care system or
That's right.
any number of things.
That was one of the most surprising things I learned when researching human trafficking. Was obviously Nona is from Central America, but one of the things that it makes sense when thinking about it, but I hadn't thought about it, was the vulnerability of the kids in the foster care system in the United States, and how they don't have anywhere to go, and they want a home, and they're desperate to have a home, they're desperate to be loved, and that is also a place of high attention for human traffickers and sex traffickers, is in the foster care system. So we just, as Kay says at CAST, she says, you just have to be more aware, you have to keep an eye out, know what to look for, and try and be more aware, conscious.
Let's talk about casting a little bit, because you mentioned Sulem. That's her name, right?
Sulem, yes.
Yeah. She was phenomenal, and it's amazing that this was her first feature.
I know.
How did you find her, and what was that process like?
It's funny. This movie's been like a real sort of road of trust and sort of seeing how things unfold. And Michael knew Jesse McKinney, who plays Hecho, and Jesse is very involved in the church in the Los Angeles area, and so he started to sort of keep an eye out for girls who wanted to have an opportunity as an actress that could play that they're from Honduras, and there was about 4 or 5 girls that Michael met with. My husband, he doesn't audition actors, like regardless if they've done something or not. He just meets with them and feels like they have the characteristics of what he's looking for, and he trusts that it will come, and that he's confident enough as a filmmaker that he can get the performance. But so Michael met with about 4 or 5 young women that Jesse had sort of met and thought there might be something that could be a match there, and every single one of them was special in their own way. But it was Sulem who, like, when he met her, I remember he took a picture of her and he sent the picture to me and he said, "I think I found our Nona, but I want to know what your thoughts are." And I just knew instantly. It was like meeting. It was like knowing just through and through that you've found the spirit of that person and that character. And she's since booked like the Jungle Cruise, and she's gonna be a big star. She's incredible, and she's just such a wonderful, wonderful human being. So like rooting for her.
I am too. I felt that innocence in her, which is maybe what you
Very
guys
much
saw.
so. Yeah.
It's so genuine and
Yeah.
authentic, and
Yeah.
it felt like so many young women, like my nieces or my cousins, or
Right.
She felt so relatable in that way that it really draws you in.
Yeah, her eyes are incredible.
Yeah.
Like she tells so much with her eyes, and And she's also, she's fearless too. I mean, Michael said to her, look, we're going to be shooting in these parts of the world, and you're going to be going to places emotionally that are deep and dark. And she was just, fearless and just dove right in and was just absolutely incredible. Like she's a revelation in the movie, I think. She's incredible.
And so is Hecho, Jesse. I mean, he's so charming, and you're like, I know you're not going to do great things.
I know.
But you're so charming in this movie.
And I think that was really the brilliance of that performance and in Michael's direction of that performance is that it's so easy, right, to sort of play a villain where you're like, oh, I'm a mean, terrible person, which, what he does is awful and horrendous and despicable. But he's also a human being, and he's in a dynamic that, you don't learn so much about why he's in that dynamic, but you get a sense that he has other things going on, that he's there for whatever reason it might be, and he has his own conflicts with it. He has his own sort of humanity within the situation and human emotions, and I think it really was creating that empathy in that character that was the real tricky stroke, to achieve, that I think they both did a brilliant job with.
And a reminder that traffickers don't look like monsters.
Right.
They look like men.
And in fact,
or women.
Right. No, absolutely. And Michael thought to cast Jesse because, he speaks Spanish fluently, obviously, but Michael had learned that the traffickers are clever. They really have all different ways of sort of like manipulating and luring, young men and women. And one of the ways Michael had learned was they're sending these like really kind of cute, charming people down there to sort of say like, hey, you've got something special. Like, I know you do. Come live with my aunt in America. Like, we'll figure it out. It doesn't matter. You can pay me back later. And there's the real like kind of charm and sort of like complete trust that, of course, fleeing from places where you just think I have to be anywhere but here. And there's this like open, charming face, just sort of like with a smile, you trust it. And so that was really what the character was based on for Mike, was that kind of part of the research of, you're right, like the face of a trafficker isn't like someone like in the corner sort of like rubbing their hands together. You know what I mean?
So as a producer on this project, how did that change your experience? And is it something that will impact you going forward with like what you choose to be a part of, what you choose to act in, what you choose to produce? Is it nice to have just that kind of control over what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I love being an actor. I live for the moments of like sort of separating from yourself and into another person. I mean, it's just such an incredible feeling. It feels like you kind of take flight for a minute. And like, so I think that's sort of, as an actor, what everyone chases. I felt at a certain point, I mean, I've been doing this now for like 21 or 22 years. So I felt like it was time to kind of, to sort of widen the horizon a little bit. And I'm very much into like problem solving and solutions and sort of figuring a million things out at once. And so I thought, I think I'd actually be pretty good as a producer. And I started becoming more involved in the process of whatever project I was on that was like so far from just acting. I was like, I was doing things where, Michael and other people were like, you should really be like, this is like, or directing or something, this is kind of stepping outside of your lane a little bit. So I just thought, yeah, okay. And so this really gave me the kind of courage to push me to do that, because it was really just Michael and myself doing this. And now I'm on a show for Netflix called Island that is sort of sci-fi, but grounded sort of really cool character sci-fi. And I'm a producer on that show as well, more in a creative capacity. But I'm loving it, and absolutely really grateful that Netflix and Nomadic invited me to obviously to the table and say, we really we'd love for you to be a part of that part of the team.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you're starring in that as well.
Right, yeah.
So you just added more work to your plate, starring and producing. Is it hard to balance it?
Oh my God. I've always been one of those strange people that's just like, I'm comfortable with a lot on my plate. And when I don't have a lot on my plate is when I go really, really crazy. You don't want to see that person. She's a little too nuts.
And I did a little reading into Island, and it seems like it's sort of a physical role as well. Mm-hmm. So what kind of prep went into getting ready for that?
Well, they're a bit secretive about the concept and everything, but it takes, we shoot in the Dominican Republic. I have to go back there actually on Sunday. And it takes place sort of in a deserted island type situation. So, it was really about sort of embracing that environment and sort of what that entails. I can't give too much away, but just kind of feeling like a more survivalist headspace in a sense. And so I really take on, Blue Crush was the same. I'd never touched a surfboard, so I was very much like, one, I had to be incredibly convincing as a surfer because that was the entire movie, but also like my physique had to change 100% as well. And I like doing that because it makes me feel like a totally different person. Like I obviously have red hair now, and that's for the character in Island. And for me, it's like the physical transformation is equally as important as the emotional one. And it's sort of like the physical is easier to sort of attain, where you're like, oh, I feel different, I look different now, I'm different hair color, to what I usually am, or like, my body's gotten different, and you just walk differently, or you start to have different characteristics that become another person. So I love embracing the physicality and the wardrobe and everything. It's all I love considering every aspect of that.
That's really interesting to hear you say. I really never thought about how changing your body really does make you step into somebody else's shoes much quicker.
Yeah, my posture will change. Yeah. My posture on Island is very specific, and I'm working with a trainer there, and we talk a lot about posture and sort of how one that what she's been through would hold herself, and everything. It's a visual medium, so everything that you are doing is conveying something, And so, yeah, I love thinking about everything in that sense.
That's so cool. I can't wait to see it.
Thank you.
2019, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We'll check it out on Netflix.
Thank you.
I think we have a couple questions from the audience. Who do we have first?
Hi. So my question is, so obviously it seems like this project was very impactful for you on an emotional level. Are there any other kind of issues related to either trafficking or immigration or other kind of social issues around the world that you would want to explore in a film next?
Ooh, that's a good question. There's so many. And yet it's sort of, honestly, it's a little bit tough for me to think about right now because this was like it's been such an all-consuming experience that I think I'd have to really learn a lot from really consider sort of what this experience was like and think about what I could offer, what Michael could offer, what we could do that would tell a story narratively that would connect in a way that would be a different take. Part of the reason why we felt strongly about this movie was the approach to it, which was anytime you hear about human trafficking or you see something about human trafficking, either in doc style or in a narrative style, is that you're normally right there, you're in the sex house, you're with the trafficker, you're seeing the abuse. And Michael and I talked a lot about what if we started with how this happens. So you start in Honduras with just a girl, and she's just cooking her rice and beans, and she's just, and it's so you get to know she's just a girl, she's a daughter, she's a sister, and she's just like anyone. And so the approach to it was very important, and that's what really inspired us to tell the story. So I think it would have to be about really thinking about how to tell the story that would be inspired by the subject matter. I don't know if that answers your question very well, but
it's good. Next question.
Hi, thank you for being
here. Hi, thank you.
So what message do you want audiences to take away after watching Nona?
The most important thing for us with this movie was there's so much. We live in a very polarized sort of conflicted time. That's just we see that sort of in a million examples per day, and so I feel I think Michael and I both feel that the idea of staying connected to humanity and having empathy for other human beings and to really consider the other person and sort of where they started and why they're there and the circumstances that led them there and to who they are. We cannot lose that connection with humanity or empathy for each other, because we lose that, I think we're in a very dangerous zone. And so I would say to that extent to make sure that you stay connected, to really consider other people. And, it's also like we live in a quite a sort of, I think, narcissistic, selfish time, where we're all like this, we're all liking this, we're all like, I'm guilty of it too. It's just we're living in that kind of an age in history. But perhaps this can be a reminder to look up and feel connected with one another. Yeah.
And what I took from it is sometimes a small detail can tell you a lot. So
Especially
if you
with
see
trafficking,
something,
yeah.
say something, especially when it comes to trafficking.
Absolutely.
Because if something's out of place, there might be something kind of behind that.
Absolutely. And really, I strongly encourage you to check out Cast LA. They're incredible. Yeah.
And last question?
Hi.
Hi.
What was the most meaningful part about being involved in this film for you?
The most meaningful part, I think, for me was the kind of combination of art and activism. It started from such a pure place, of saying, yes, that's a story. That's something that I haven't really heard before. And it should be told because this is happening to people. But, so I didn't start out saying, and then I'm going to be an activist with it, but it just started from an artistically pure place and a sort of a humanitarian pure place. But as I started to learn more about the subject matter and the issue, I couldn't help but just really become far more involved in the activism and feel like it sort of started to depart from a movie and into a mission in many ways. Yeah.
Well, first of all, Michael did an amazing job with the film. It's very beautiful and just a joy to watch. And the message is so important, so I hope people do take the time to check it out.
Thank you.
Nona is going to be out tomorrow in New York and LA and available on VOD in January. Give it up for Kate Bosworth.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.